I didn't expect a weekend in the mountains to change anything. The cabin retreat was supposed to be simple. For days away from campus before graduation swallowed us whole. No exams, no internships, no endless conversations about where we'd all end up after college. Just a group of friends renting an old cabin deep in the woods, grilling food, hiking trails, playing stupid card games, and pretending we still had all the time in the world. Looking back, maybe that was exactly why everything happened. Because none of us realized it was probably the last time we'd all be together like that. My name is Casey. I was 22, finishing my final semester, and if you'd asked anyone who knew me, they would have described me as reliable. The guy who remembered everyone's birthday. The one who always drove because nobody trusted Ethan behind the wheel. The friend who never made things complicated. I like that reputation. Life was easier when people knew exactly what to expect from you. Then there was Bennett, also 22. If I was predictable, Bennett was impossible. He could spend an hour making everyone laugh until their stomach hurt, then disappear onto the porch alone without saying a word. He talked to strangers like they'd been friends for years, but struggled to answer a simple, "How are you?" if you asked him seriously. He had this habit of smiling before he actually laughed, like his face always knew something good was about to happen. It annoyed me. At least, that's what I kept telling myself. We'd known each other since freshman year. Same psychology elective. Same study group. Same circle of friends after that. Close enough to text each other memes almost daily. Not close enough for anyone to think there was anything unusual between us, including me. At least that's what I believed. The trip started early Friday morning. 3 cars met in the university parking lot just after sunrise. The sky still looked pale, the campus unusually quiet without students rushing to class. Who's riding with who? Ethan asked while throwing bags into different trunks. I call shotgun. Mia yelled. You called it yesterday. Noah complained. I called it first. You call everything first. The argument continued exactly the way everyone expected. I stood beside my SUV checking that we'd packed enough water when Bennett walked over carrying a backpack that looked far too small for a 4-day trip. Morning. Morning. You sleeping? Not really. Same. He leaned against the car beside me, both of us watching everyone else argue over seating arrangements. I think we're officially adults, he said. Because nobody can decide who gets the front seat? No. He smiled. Because everyone's complaining about their backs before we've even started driving. I laughed. You've got a point. For a second, neither of us said anything. Then Mia pointed toward us. Casey, Bennett, you two are driving together. I looked over. What? We already sorted it. While you were standing there looking dramatic. I wasn't looking dramatic. Bennett looked at me. You kind of were. I rolled my eyes. Fine. He threw his backpack into the back seat before I could object. That should have been the first clue. The drive took almost 4 hours. At first, everyone stayed connected through speakerphone between the cars, making terrible jokes and trying to synchronize playlists. After about an hour, the conversations faded. The highway stretched endlessly ahead. Bennett rested one arm against the window. You ever think about how weird this is? What? Graduating. I try not to. My parents already keep asking where I'm moving. What do you tell them? The truth. Which is, I have absolutely no idea. I laughed quietly. That's honest. What about you? I accepted an internship. I know. You asked. I know I asked. He looked out the window again. I don't know. What? It feels like everyone's already walking away. The words stayed in the car longer than either of us expected. I understood exactly what he meant. College had always felt permanent while we were living it. Now every conversation somehow ended with addresses in different cities, different jobs, different futures. I don't think people disappear that easily, I said. You really believe that? I have to. He nodded slowly. I wish I did. About 30 minutes later, he fell asleep. His head rested lightly against the window. For some reason, every time we hit a bump, I'd instinctively slow down. I told myself it was because the roads were narrow. It had nothing to do with him. The cabin was even better than the photos. Huge wooden beams, a stone fireplace, 2 wraparound porches overlooking endless trees, a small lake only a few hundred feet away. No phone signal. No signal. Noah groaned. We're officially surviving. Mia raised both arms dramatically. We're free. We're trapped, Noah corrected. Everyone laughed. Inside, the place smelled like cedar and old books. Bedrooms lined the second floor. The downstairs had one enormous living room with oversized couches facing the fireplace. "This place is amazing," Bennett said. He wasn't wrong. It felt removed from reality, like the outside world had quietly stopped existing. Naturally, the first argument started 3 minutes later. "I'm not sharing with Ethan." I snore. "You scream in your sleep." "I do not." "You absolutely do." Eventually, everyone claimed rooms. Without thinking, Bennett dropped his backpack into the last room available. "Mine." He looked up. "Oh." I looked at him. "Oh." Ethan grinned from the hallway. "Guess fate decided." "It's just a room," I said. Bennett shrugged. "Works for me." Neither of us bothered changing it. The afternoon disappeared quickly. People unpacked. Music played through an old Bluetooth speaker. Someone started grilling burgers outside. Someone else found a deck of cards. Everything felt easy, comfortable, like we'd all slipped back into freshman year somehow. That evening, after dinner, we carried chairs down toward the lake. The sun had almost disappeared behind the trees. The water reflected orange light like glass. Nobody talked much. Sometimes silence only works around people you've known for years. Bennett skipped a flat stone across the lake. 5 skips. Show off. I practiced. I didn't ask. "You were thinking it." "I wasn't." "You absolutely were." He smiled without looking at me. "You always make that face." "What face?" "The one where you're pretending not to be impressed." "I've never made that face." He laughed. "You just did." I hated that he was right. Later, after everyone wandered back toward the cabin, I stayed behind for another minute. The woods were unbelievably quiet. No traffic, no distant sirens, just wind moving through pine trees. "You coming?" I turned. Bennett stood halfway up the path waiting. "Yeah." As we walked back together, he kicked small rocks along the trail. "You know what's weird?" "What now?" "I've known you almost 4 years." "Sounds about right." "And I still don't think I know what you're thinking most of the time." "I don't think anyone does." "I'd like to." The sentence landed strangely. Not uncomfortable. Just heavier than the conversation around it. I looked over. "What makes you think there's anything interesting in there?" He smiled again. "I didn't say interesting." "So what did you say?" I said I'd like to know. For some reason, I couldn't think of an answer. Back at the cabin, everyone had already started another card game. Music echoed through the living room. Someone handed me a drink. The conversation moved on. But later that night, lying in the bunk bed across from Bennett while rain quietly started tapping against the roof, I caught myself staring at the ceiling instead of sleeping. Across the room, I could hear him shifting beneath his blanket. "You awake?" he asked softly. "Yeah." "You thinking too?" "A little." "About graduation?" "Among other things." Silence. Then, "I'm glad you're here." Simple words. Nothing unusual. Exactly the kind of thing friends said all the time. So why did they stay with me long after the room became quiet again? I closed my eyes. Outside, the rain grew heavier. Inside, something I couldn't quite name had already started changing. I woke up before everyone else. For a few seconds, I forgot where I was. The unfamiliar wooden ceiling, the smell of pine, the soft gray light coming through the curtains, it all felt distant until I heard rain dripping from the roof outside. Then I remembered. The cabin. The retreat. Graduation waiting for us on the other side of the weekend. I climbed carefully out of bed, trying not to wake Bennett. He was still asleep on the bunk across from mine, one arm hanging over the edge. His hair was a complete mess, and somehow he looked younger than he usually did. Peaceful. I looked away almost immediately. There wasn't any reason to keep staring. Downstairs, I started making coffee. A few minutes later, footsteps creaked on the stairs. "You seriously wake up this early?" I turned. Bennett was standing there wearing a faded university hoodie and sweatpants. "You seriously followed the smell of coffee?" "I'd follow coffee anywhere." "You look terrible." "So do you." "Fair." He grabbed another mug and leaned against the kitchen counter while the coffee brewed. Outside, rain continued falling steadily across the lake. "I kind of like this weather," he admitted. "You?" "Mr. Hiking." "I didn't say I wanted to hike in it." "So what do you like?" He looked out the window. "It makes everything slower." I understood exactly what he meant. No one was rushing anywhere. There was nowhere to rush to. Just us. The cabin. The rain. The others didn't wake for almost another hour. Soon the quiet disappeared. Music. Breakfast. Noah complaining about the lack of Wi-Fi for at least the 10th time. Mia insisting everyone should play board games. By noon, the rain had softened into a light drizzle. We're not staying inside all day, Ethan declared. We absolutely are, Noah replied. We came here for nature. We came here because the cabin has heating. Eventually, someone suggested hiking anyway. After 15 minutes of debating, everyone agreed. Mostly because Bennett had already grabbed a backpack. The trail started directly behind the cabin. Wet pine needles covered the ground. Everything smelled fresh after the rain. Mia walked ahead with Ethan. Noah kept stopping to photograph mushrooms for reasons none of us understood. Without planning it, Bennett and I drifted toward the back of the group. You hike much? He asked. My parents used to take me camping. You hated it? I hated waking up at 5 in the morning. You still do. I absolutely do. You literally made coffee before sunrise. I've matured. He laughed. No. I've become responsible. Still no. The trail narrowed as it climbed uphill. At one point, Mia called back. You two coming? We're right here, Bennett answered. She smiled knowingly before turning back around. I frowned. What was that? What? That smile. What smile? You know exactly which one. I genuinely don't. He sounded convincing. Too convincing. About an hour into the hike, we reached an overlook. The trees opened onto an incredible view of rolling mountains disappearing into low clouds. Everyone immediately pulled out their phones despite having no signal. Proof we were here, Noah said. We spent almost 30 minutes taking ridiculous group photos. Someone suggested pairs. Mia immediately grabbed Ethan. Noah wandered toward the viewpoint. Leaving. Me and Bennett. Oh, I muttered. He looked at me. What? I think we've been assigned. I've survived worse. I rolled my eyes. You really think highly of yourself. I think highly of making fun of you. Mia held up her phone. Stand closer. We're standing. Closer. We are close. You look like co-workers. Bennett laughed. Apparently we're co-workers. We're definitely co-workers. Move. We stepped another foot closer. There, Mia said. Perfect. The camera clicked several times. Then she lowered the phone. Actually, what now? I asked. You two look surprisingly good together. Nobody said anything. Mia blinked. What? You made it weird. Ethan sighed. I made what weird? Everything. She looked genuinely confused. I just meant for the picture. Sure, Noah said. I did. Everyone laughed. Even Bennett. I laughed too. But something about the moment lingered longer than it should have. The hike back felt quieter. The group spread out naturally. At one point, I found myself walking beside Bennett again. You okay? He asked. Yeah. You've been quiet. So have you. Fair. Another few minutes passed. Then he spoke again. You know? What? I don't think Mia meant anything. I know. But. There isn't a but. There definitely is. I sighed. I just don't like when people assume things. What if they aren't assuming? I looked over. What does that mean? He shrugged. Nothing. Bennett. I said nothing. He smiled. The kind of smile that clearly meant something. Back at the cabin, everyone split off to shower or nap before dinner. I decided to sit on the porch. The rain had finally stopped. Clouds drifted slowly between the trees. The silence felt different now, like the woods were listening. The porch door opened behind me. Bennett stepped outside carrying 2 bottles of water. He handed me one. I figured you'd forget. I probably would have. I know. He sat beside me. For several minutes we watched the lake without speaking. Then he asked something completely unexpected. Can I ask you something? You just did. He smiled. A real question. Shoot. When we graduate. I waited. Do you think people actually stay friends? I didn't answer immediately. I hope so. That's not what I asked. No, it isn't. He looked down at the bottle in his hands. I think everybody says they'll stay in touch. They usually mean it. For a while. I couldn't argue. I'd seen it happen before. Friends drifted. Life became busy. Calls became texts. Texts became birthdays. Then nothing. I don't want that, he admitted quietly. Neither do I. He nodded once. I was worried you'd say something practical. Like, that's just life. I hate that sentence. So do I. We smiled at the same time. The front door suddenly burst open. There you are. Mia shouted. We're making dinner. You make it sound like an emergency. I called back. It is if Ethan keeps cooking. Hey. We laughed and headed inside. Dinner became another loud, chaotic evening. Music echoed through the cabin. Someone started dancing badly. Someone else accidentally dropped an entire plate of grilled vegetables. By the time everything was cleaned up, darkness had settled outside. No electricity around the lake, meant the stars looked unreal. I've got an idea, Noah announced. Dangerous words. Let's turn every light off. Why? So we can actually see the sky. 5 minutes later, the cabin was almost completely dark. Everyone carried blankets down toward the dock. The lake reflected thousands of stars. I'd never seen anything like it. No city lights, Bennett whispered beside me. It's incredible. We all lay there quietly. No music. No conversations. Just the occasional sound of water touching the wooden dock. After a while, Mia yawned. I'm freezing. You brought one blanket, Ethan reminded her. I underestimated nature. One by one, people headed back toward the cabin. Eventually, only Bennett and I remained. Neither of us moved. You know what I realized today? He asked. What? I've spent more time talking to you this weekend than I probably did all semester. Classes. Excuses. I smiled. Maybe. He turned slightly toward me. No. His voice had changed. Softer. More serious. I think I forgot how easy it is. What is? Talking to you. The words settled somewhere deep inside me. I never stopped. He looked surprised. You didn't? No. He smiled slowly. I'm glad. We stayed there another few minutes. Neither of us wanted to be the first one to stand. Finally, Bennett sighed. We should probably head back. Probably. We walked toward the cabin through the darkness, our flashlights barely lighting the narrow trail. About halfway back, Bennett stopped. What? He pointed upward. A meteor streaked silently across the sky before disappearing beyond the trees. There. I saw it. You know you're supposed to make a wish. I already know mine. I laughed. You answered too fast. I've had it for a while. What is it? He looked at me for a long second, then smiled. If I tell you. He started walking again. It won't come true. For reasons I couldn't explain, I spent the rest of the night wondering whether that answer had anything to do with me. The next morning started with sunshine. Real sunshine. The kind that pours through every window and makes yesterday's rain feel like it happened weeks ago. By 8 o'clock, the cabin was already alive. Someone had connected a speaker outside. Ethan was trying to convince everyone to rent kayaks from the small dock across the lake. Noah was somehow burning pancakes. Mia claimed she wasn't laughing while very obviously laughing. I walked onto the porch carrying my coffee. Bennett was already sitting on the railing. You were right. About what? The rain. He looked out across the lake. Everything feels different today. The lake reflected the bright blue sky so perfectly it almost looked unreal. You planning on kayaking? I asked. I wasn't. You are now. I don't trust Ethan. Neither do I. So why are we going? Because if we don't, Mia will never let us hear the end of it. He sighed dramatically. A solid argument. An hour later, we found ourselves at the small rental dock. The owner handed us life jackets with the enthusiasm of someone who had repeated the same safety speech every day for 20 years. Stay close to shore. We will. No racing. No racing. No standing. Ethan looked offended. I wasn't going to stand. You absolutely were. Everyone laughed. There were only 3 double kayaks left. Naturally, people paired off without thinking. Mia and Ethan. Noah with Olivia. Leaving. You've got to be kidding, I muttered. Bennett looked at me. What? I think this weekend keeps deciding things for us. I don't mind. I noticed. He climbed into the front seat before I could answer. I settled into the back. Ready? He asked. No. Excellent. He pushed away from the dock anyway. For the first 10 minutes, we were terrible. You missed the stroke. I'm literally following you. You're following badly. You're steering. I'm trying. We're spinning. We're absolutely spinning. The owner watched us from the dock and slowly shook his head. Even he looked disappointed. Eventually, we figured it out. The kayak finally moved in something resembling a straight line. There we go, Bennett said proudly. I'd like to apologize to everyone who had to witness that. I blame you. I was in the back. Exactly. Soon the cabin looked surprisingly small from the middle of the lake. The others drifted farther ahead. The water barely rippled beneath us. It was unbelievably quiet. Bennett rested his paddle across the kayak. Let's just float for a minute. We'll fall behind. I know. He smiled. I don't care. Neither did I. We drifted slowly. The only sounds were birds somewhere in the trees and water touching the sides of the kayak. This feels nice, he said quietly. It does. He looked back over his shoulder. You know? What? I've been thinking about something. Should I be worried? Probably. I laughed. Go on. Freshman year. What about it? The day we met. I remember. You do? Psychology lecture. You stole my seat. I did not. You absolutely did. There weren't assigned seats. You still stole it. I smiled. You sat beside me anyway. I know. Why? He looked forward again. I don't know. I wasn't sure I believed him. I think you do. He stayed quiet for several seconds. Then, I thought you looked lonely. The answer surprised me. I wasn't. I know that now. You really thought that? You always sat a little apart from everyone. I liked paying attention. You looked like you were somewhere else. I hadn't realized anyone noticed. Especially not him. You came over anyway. I almost didn't. What changed your mind? He laughed softly. You look like someone who'd actually answer questions during group projects. I burst out laughing. That's your big reason? It was a practical decision. Sure. It worked. It had. For years later we were still here, floating in the middle of a mountain lake. Neither of us said anything after that. Some conversations didn't need filling. Eventually Ethan shouted from farther ahead. Are you two coming? We're enjoying nature. Bennett called back. Nature can wait. We disagree. You always disagree. I know. I shook my head. You enjoy annoying him. I enjoy annoying everyone. True. He smiled. Not everyone. That sentence stayed with me. Back at the cabin, everyone spent the afternoon swimming from the dock. I stayed on shore. Mostly because the water was colder than anyone had expected. Bennett climbed out after about 15 minutes. I officially regret every life decision. You lasted longer than Noah. He screamed. He absolutely screamed. He'll deny it. He always does. We wrapped ourselves in towels and sat at the end of the dock while the others continued splashing around. The sun felt warm against my shoulders. Bennett skipped another stone across the water. Only 3 skips this time. I think you're losing your touch. I was distracted. By what? He looked at me. You ask a lot of questions. So do you. I know. He leaned back on his hands. Can I ask another one? You've earned it. He looked out toward the lake instead of at me. Have you ever liked someone? I waited. And realized it way too late? My stomach tightened. Late. Like. He searched for the words. They'd been right there the whole time. I answered carefully. I don't know. You've never had that happen? I'm not sure. He nodded slowly. I think I have. Something in his voice felt different. More vulnerable than I'd ever heard it. Did you tell them? No. Why not? He smiled sadly. What if telling them changes everything? I didn't have an answer. Because I understood the fear. More than I wanted to admit. The others eventually called us back for lunch. The conversation disappeared beneath louder voices. But my mind stayed there. Have you ever liked someone and realized it way too late? The question followed me for the rest of the day. That evening the group decided to build a fire outside. The temperature dropped quickly once the sun disappeared. Someone found marshmallows. Someone else found an old guitar that was almost in tune. Ethan attempted 3 songs before everyone begged him to stop. You people have no appreciation for music. We appreciate silence, Noah replied. Laughter echoed through the trees. Hours slipped by. One by one people grew tired. Mia yawned first. Olivia followed. Soon everyone drifted back inside, leaving only glowing embers in the fire pit. Once again, only Bennett and me remained. We keep doing this, I said. What? Being the last ones awake. I noticed. He pulled his chair a little closer to the fire. I don't mind. The flames cracked softly between us. You know what Ethan asked me earlier? What? He asked if something was going on. My heart skipped. What did you say? The truth. I looked up. I said no. He held my gaze. Because nothing is. The sentence should have been reassuring. Instead, it felt unfinished. After a long silence, he added quietly. But. I waited. I don't think that's going to stay true forever. Neither of us moved. The fire had burned low enough that only orange coals remained. I realized my heart was beating far harder than it should have. Because for the first time all weekend, I wasn't wondering what Bennett meant. I was almost certain I already knew. I barely slept that night. Not because anything had happened. Because something almost had. There's a strange kind of exhaustion that comes from replaying conversations instead of dreams. Every sentence Bennett had said over the last 2 days seemed different now. I've been thinking about something. I don't want us to drift apart. Have you ever liked someone and realized it too late? I don't think that's going to stay true forever. I kept telling myself I was reading too much into it. Then I remembered the way he'd looked at me after saying those words. No, maybe I wasn't imagining everything. Sunday morning arrived with clear skies again. Only one full day remained before we packed up and drove back to campus. Everyone seemed to realize it at the same time. Breakfast felt quieter. Not sad exactly, just aware. This went way too fast, Mia said. It always does, Olivia answered. Ethan stretched. We should make this an annual thing. Noah laughed. We've been saying that since sophomore year. And this time we mean it. Nobody answered. Because everyone knew how life worked. People didn't stop caring. They just became busy. After breakfast, we decided to hike to a waterfall another couple of miles beyond yesterday's trail. The path wound deeper into the forest than before. Sunlight filtered through enormous pine trees. Everything smelled warm after yesterday's rain. Halfway there, Ethan and Noah wandered ahead, arguing about fantasy football. Mia and Olivia stopped every few minutes to photograph wildflowers. Without discussing it, Bennett and I once again ended up walking together. You notice this keeps happening? He asked. What? We always end up at the back. I walk slower. You don't. I definitely do. You slowed down. For who? He smiled. I think you know. I looked ahead instead of answering. The trail narrowed until we had to walk single file. Roots crossed the ground everywhere. After a few minutes, Bennett spoke again. You've been thinking. I usually am. Not like this. What does that mean? You've answered every question this weekend. So, but you haven't asked many back. I didn't realize we were keeping score. We're not. His voice softened. I'm just wondering what's going on in your head. I stepped over a fallen branch. Nothing complicated. I don't believe you. Why? Because I've known you 4 years. He wasn't wrong. There wasn't much point pretending. I've just been thinking about graduation. Only graduation? I hesitated. He noticed. I knew it. Knew what? That there was more. I sighed. You ask impossible questions. You avoid possible answers. I laughed quietly. That's probably true. He smiled. I know. The waterfall turned out to be smaller than the photos online. Nobody cared. The water crashed over smooth rocks into a wide pool surrounded by moss-covered trees. It felt hidden, like we'd accidentally wandered into someone else's world. Everyone spread out. Some climbed onto the rocks. Others skipped stones across the water. I wandered farther downstream until the sounds of everyone else became quieter. A minute later, I heard footsteps behind me. You disappeared. I turned. You found me. I usually do. The sentence made something shift inside me. He leaned against a large rock beside the stream. For what it's worth. What? I wasn't lying last night. I know. I've been trying to figure something out. I waited. For months. What? He picked up a small stone and rolled it between his fingers. I kept thinking maybe it would go away. What would? Instead of answering, he threw the stone into the stream. It disappeared beneath the current. When we're all together. He spoke slowly now. I always end up looking for you first. I felt my heartbeat quicken. If everyone's laughing. He smiled faintly. I check whether you're laughing too. I couldn't say anything. And whenever something happens, he continued looking at the water. You're the first person I want to tell. The forest suddenly felt incredibly quiet. I didn't notice when that started. He laughed once under his breath. I wish I had. I finally managed to speak. Bennett. He looked at me. I haven't said anything because I wasn't sure. Sure about what? His eyes searched mine. Whether this was real. A pause. Or whether I was just scared of losing everyone. The honesty in his voice caught me off guard. He wasn't trying to impress me. He wasn't making some dramatic confession. He genuinely looked afraid. I still don't know. He smiled sadly. I just know I can't pretend I haven't been thinking about you. Neither of us moved. The stream continued rushing between the rocks. Birds called somewhere high in the trees. Everything else disappeared. I don't know what to say. You don't have to. I don't want to say the wrong thing. You won't. He sounded so certain. I wished I felt the same. Because the truth was, my mind had become completely tangled. I'd spent 4 years seeing Bennett as one of my closest friends. Somewhere over the last 3 days. That had stopped feeling like the whole truth. I just hadn't realized it until now. I think. I took a slow breath. I'm trying to understand something too. His expression changed. Not hopeful. Just attentive. What? I can't stop thinking about you either. The words surprised even me. Because once they were spoken, they felt obvious. Like they'd been waiting much longer than this weekend. Bennett didn't smile. He didn't celebrate. He simply looked relieved. As a friend. I opened my mouth. Closed it again. I don't know. It was the most honest answer I had. He nodded slowly. I don't know either. Somehow, that made everything easier. Neither of us had figured it out yet. We were simply standing in the middle of the same question. Casey, Ethan's voice echoed through the trees. Bennett, we're over here. Bennett answered. Footsteps approached. Mia appeared first. There you are. She looked from me to Bennett, then back again. You guys okay? Yeah, I answered. We just wandered. She studied us for another second, then smiled. Come on. As she turned away, Bennett quietly walked beside me. Neither of us spoke until we caught up with the group. Just before we reached everyone else, he said something so quietly I almost missed it. I'm glad it was you. I looked over. What? He smiled without looking back. I was really hoping it was you. For the rest of the hike. I couldn't stop wondering whether I'd been hoping for exactly the same thing all along. The walk back to the cabin felt completely different. Not because anyone else noticed. Because I did. Every conversation around us faded into background noise. Ethan kept telling a ridiculous story about getting lost during a camping trip as a kid. Mia laughed so hard she had to stop walking. Noah insisted Ethan was exaggerating. Normally, I would have joined in. Instead, I kept replaying the conversation by the stream. I can't stop thinking about you. I'm glad it was you. I wasn't embarrassed by what I'd said. I was surprised I'd needed this long to admit it. Back at the cabin, everyone scattered to shower before dinner. Our room was empty when I walked in. I sat on the edge of my bed and stared out the window. The lake shimmered beneath the afternoon sun. A knock sounded lightly against the open door. Bennett, you disappeared again. I guess I did. He leaned against the frame. You okay? I think so. You don't sound convinced. I laughed quietly. I'm trying to reorganize 4 years of memories. He smiled. Same. Neither of us moved. Then he stepped inside and sat on the bunk across from me. Can I tell you something stupid? You've earned at least one stupid thing today. He looked down at the floor. Freshman year. Yeah. I had a ridiculous excuse to keep talking to you. What excuse? I told everyone you explained statistics better than the professor. I blinked. That wasn't true. I know. You understood statistics better than I did. I wasn't asking for statistics. Realization slowly spread across my face. You just wanted to study together. He laughed. It worked. For 4 years. I know. I shook my head. I can't believe I never noticed. You weren't supposed to. Were you? I stopped. Were you what? Interested back then? He thought for several seconds. I don't think so. You don't think. I like being around you. He smiled to himself. I just thought that was enough. And now? His eyes met mine. Now it isn't. The room became very quiet. Outside, someone shouted near the dock. A door slammed downstairs. Life continued normally around us. Inside our room, everything had changed. That evening, Ethan insisted on cooking one final dinner before everyone went home the next morning. Against everyone's better judgment. I'm an excellent cook. You almost burned water yesterday, Noah reminded him. That's a myth. It literally happened. It was artistic. Dinner somehow turned out surprisingly good. Even Noah admitted it. I hate giving you credit. I'll frame this moment. Afterward, we gathered around the dining table for one last card game. Hours passed in laughter. Stories from freshman year resurfaced. Embarrassing moments. Bad haircuts. Terrible group projects. Everyone seemed determined to squeeze every possible memory out of the weekend before it ended. At one point, Mia disappeared upstairs. She came back carrying an old instant camera she'd found in one of the cabin drawers. Oh no, Ethan groaned. Oh yes. For the next 20 minutes, she photographed absolutely everything. People making faces. People laughing. Someone pretending to sleep. Eventually, she held the camera toward me. Casey. No. Yes. I'm retiring from photography. You've never participated. Exactly. She ignored me. Bennett. He looked up. Help me. With what? Get over here. Without hesitation, he walked over beside me. There. She aimed the camera. You too smile. We are. No. She frowned. You smile like you're posing for university ID cards. We're smiling. Bennett. What? Make him laugh. I've been trying for 4 years. I heard that. I wanted you to. I rolled my eyes. He leaned slightly closer. Remember freshman orientation? What about it? You walked into the wrong classroom. I did not. You absolutely introduced yourself to 30 engineering students. I was lost. You gave a speech. I said my name. You welcomed yourself to mechanical engineering. The memory hit me all at once. I started laughing. The camera clicked. There. Mia grinned. Perfect. A small square photo slowly developed in her hands. She stared at it for a moment, then smiled strangely. What? She handed it to me. I looked down. Neither of us was looking at the camera. We were looking at each other, completely unaware. Bennett leaned over my shoulder. Oh, neither of us spoke. The picture somehow felt more honest than either of us had intended. Mia quietly tucked it into my hand. Keep it. Later that night, everyone drifted off to pack for the drive home. The cabin became quiet much earlier than before. I stepped onto the back porch, carrying 2 mugs of tea. Bennett was already there. I had a feeling. He accepted 1 mug. Thanks. The air felt cooler than the previous nights. Summer was beginning to fade. So, I leaned against the railing. So, we leave tomorrow. I know. Neither of us liked saying it aloud. I've been thinking, Bennett said. Dangerous. I've had practice. I smiled. I believe you. He looked toward the dark outline of the lake. I don't want this weekend to become one of those stories. What kind? The kind people tell every few years. Remember that cabin trip? Yeah, we should do something like that again. And then nobody ever does. I nodded slowly. I don't want that either. He looked at me. I'm not talking about the group. I know. He stepped a little closer. I mean us. The sentence settled quietly between us. I'm scared, he admitted. Of what? That will go back to campus. He paused. Pretend nothing happened. Graduate. Move to different cities. And spend years wondering what would have happened if we'd been honest. I took a long breath. I don't want that. You don't. No. He searched my face carefully. Then tell me something. What? When you picture next month. He smiled nervously. Am I still there? The answer came before I could overthink it. Yeah. No hesitation. There wasn't any. He laughed softly. I was really hoping you'd say that. I think. I looked out over the lake before continuing. I've spent years assuming you were simply one of the most important people in my life. And I never stopped to ask why. He didn't interrupt. I think. I smiled at how familiar those words had become. I'm finally asking. For the first time all weekend, Bennett looked completely at peace. I already know my answer. What is it? He met my eyes. I don't want to imagine my future without you in it. The words were simple. No dramatic confession. No impossible promises. Just honesty. And somehow, that felt even bigger. Neither of us spoke after that. We simply stood side by side beneath a sky full of stars, knowing that tomorrow morning we'd leave the cabin. But for the first time since arriving, going home no longer felt like the end of something. It felt like the beginning. The drive back to campus was louder than the drive to the cabin, almost as if everyone was trying to delay the moment the weekend officially ended. Music played through the speakers. Ethan insisted on ranking everyone's worst cooking attempts from the past 4 years. Noah defended himself far more passionately than the situation deserved. Mia kept passing around the instant photos she'd taken. Every few minutes someone laughed because another ridiculous picture surfaced. By the time we reached campus, the sun had already started dropping behind the buildings. Cars pulled into the student parking lot one by one. Suitcases appeared. Goodbyes began. Don't disappear after graduation, Olivia said, hugging everyone before climbing into her car. We'll make a group chat. We already have one. A better group chat. Ethan pointed dramatically. I'm holding everyone personally responsible if this friendship dies. It won't, Mia said. But even she sounded like she was trying to convince herself. One by one, everyone left. Eventually, only Bennett and I remained beside our cars. The parking lot suddenly felt much larger. So, we survived. Barely. He smiled. I'll call you later? I nodded. I'd like that. There was a tiny pause. Neither of us seemed eager to get into our cars. Finally, he laughed. This is becoming a problem. What is? I keep not wanting conversations with you to end. I've noticed. He looked relieved when I smiled. Me too. He opened his car door. I'll see you tonight. Tonight. As he drove away, I realized something. For the first time in years, I wasn't saying goodbye to Bennett. I was looking forward to seeing him again in a few hours. True to his word, he called that evening. The conversation lasted almost 3 hours. At first we talked about the cabin, then classes, then graduation paperwork, then absolutely nothing important. Somehow we ended up debating which professor gave the strangest lectures. At one point I looked at the clock. Wait. What? It's almost midnight. No. It is. There was a pause. I didn't even notice. Neither did I. He laughed quietly. I guess that answers one question. What question? Whether we actually enjoy talking to each other. I think we solved that years ago. Apparently, another comfortable silence settled between us. Then he spoke. Can I ask you something? You always do. Would it be weird? He hesitated. If we kept doing this? Talking? No. His voice carried a hint of nervousness. I mean, spending time together. I smiled even though he couldn't see it. I was hoping you'd ask. You were. I was trying to figure out how to ask first. He laughed. Good. So, dinner this week? Wednesday. Wednesday. It sounded surprisingly normal. Almost disappointingly normal. Except nothing about it felt ordinary. Wednesday arrived much slower than it should have. I changed shirts 3 times before leaving my apartment. Halfway across campus, I caught myself laughing. I wasn't preparing for an interview or a presentation. I was going to dinner with Bennett. So why did I feel nervous? Because this was different. Not dramatically, not officially, just different. He was already waiting outside the small Italian restaurant we'd visited dozens of times with friends. When he saw me, he smiled. There you are. I could say the same thing. You look nice. The compliment caught me off guard. So do you? He rubbed the back of his neck. Okay. What? This already feels different. I know. Neither of us seemed uncomfortable, just aware. Inside, the hostess looked around. Table for 2. Bennett answered before I could. Yeah. The words sounded incredibly simple, yet hearing them made my heart race. Table for 2. Not because the group was busy, not because nobody else could come, because it was just us. Dinner felt strangely easy. We talked exactly the way we always had. Except now neither of us pretended not to notice the moments when our eyes met across the table. So, I asked, what? When did you realize? He smiled. You really want to know? I do. He thought for a while. I don't think there was one moment. No, I think there were hundreds. I waited. You remember sophomore year? The economics project? You brought me coffee before our presentation. You looked exhausted. I was. He laughed. I spent the whole presentation wondering why that mattered so much. I smiled. I completely forgot that. I didn't. He leaned back slightly. What about you? I looked down at my glass. I honestly don't know. Try. I laughed. Okay. I thought for a long moment. I think. He grinned. You always start with that. I know. I like it. I continued. I think I got used to you always being there. And I stopped noticing how unusual that was. He stayed quiet. I measured good days by whether I'd run into you. The word surprised me. I'd save funny stories until I knew I'd see you. His smile softened. If something happened, I wanted to tell you first. He nodded slowly. So, I looked at him. Maybe I've been figuring this out for longer than I realized. After dinner, we walked slowly through campus. Students crossed the sidewalks carrying backpacks. Someone practiced saxophone in a nearby music building. The familiar place suddenly looked different. I've been thinking about graduation again, Bennett admitted. This time in a good way. I think so. What changed? He smiled. I stopped imagining it alone. We reached the small lake near the center of campus. The same place where students gathered every spring. We stopped beside the water. You know what's funny? He asked. What? If someone had told freshman year me that I'd be standing here having this conversation with you, what would have happened? I would have laughed. I would have laughed too. He looked out across the lake. I'm glad they would have been wrong. I looked at him. So am I. There wasn't some dramatic declaration. No audience. No perfect soundtrack. Just 2 people who had spent years becoming important to each other without realizing exactly how important. Bennett took a slow breath. I think. Now it was my turn to smile. You're stealing my line. I learned from the best. He laughed. I think I'd like us to stop wondering. I knew exactly what he meant. No more guessing? No more guessing. I nodded. I'd like that too. He smiled. So, would you like to be my boyfriend? The question was almost hidden beneath a nervous laugh, as if he still couldn't believe he was asking it. I didn't need a second to think. Yeah, just one word. But it carried 4 years of friendship, one unforgettable weekend, and every conversation that had quietly led us here. His smile grew wider than I'd ever seen before. I was really hoping you'd say that. I know. For a moment, neither of us spoke. We simply stood beside the lake, smiling like 2 people who had finally stopped pretending they didn't already know the answer. And somehow, that felt like the easiest beginning in the world. Graduation arrived faster than any of us expected. One week we were complaining about final papers. The next we were standing in rented gowns, pretending not to think about how this chapter of our lives was ending. Campus looked different. Families filled every walkway. Parents took hundreds of photos. Professors shook hands with students they'd watched grow for 4 years. It felt like the whole university had paused for one last day. I spotted Bennett almost immediately. He was standing with his parents across the lawn. When he noticed me, he smiled before I even raised my hand. That smile had become strangely familiar. Like coming home. He crossed the lawn. "You made it." I was considering skipping graduation. "You would have regretted it." "I know." He adjusted the collar of his gown. "You nervous?" "A little." "You?" "I haven't decided yet." "You've had 4 years." "I needed all of them." He laughed. "So dramatic." I learned from Ethan. No one should learn from Ethan. The ceremony itself passed in a blur. Names. Applause. Speeches about the future. Promises that we'd all change the world. I remembered almost none of it. What I remembered was looking across rows of graduates until I found Bennett. Every single time. Every time I looked up, he somehow looked back. Like we'd both been doing exactly the same thing. After the ceremony, the campus exploded into celebration. Everyone wanted photos. Families gathered. Friends hugged. Phones never stopped ringing. Our group eventually met beside the old library. The same place where we'd first become friends. Ethan arrived carrying a ridiculous plastic bag. "I have something." "No, Noah sighed. "Yes." He pulled out 8 folded envelopes. "What are those?" "I made everyone write letters on the first night at the cabin." Mia blinked. "Wait. You don't remember? You said they were for some game." I lied. "You always lie." "This one was worth it." He handed each of us an envelope. "What's inside?" "You wrote where you thought you'd be in 5 years." Everyone immediately became curious. We opened them together. Laughter erupted almost instantly. Noah had predicted he'd become famous online. He hadn't. Mia claimed she'd owned 3 dogs. She still didn't have one. Olivia somehow predicted almost everything correctly. "That's creepy," Ethan said. "I planned." "You cheated." Finally, I unfolded mine. The paper was dated the first evening at the cabin. My own handwriting stared back at me. 5 years from now, I hope I don't lose the people who made college feel like home. Especially Bennett. Sometimes I think he's the person who's understood me best here. I hope he's still in my life. I stopped reading. The words blurred. I'd written that before anything had happened. Before the conversations. Before the waterfall. Before either of us admitted anything. I'd already known. I just hadn't understood what I knew. A voice beside me interrupted my thoughts. "Casey." I looked up. Bennett was staring at his own letter. Then at me. "You too." "What?" He slowly handed me the page. At the bottom, in messy handwriting, one sentence had been underlined. "If there's one person I don't want to lose after graduation, it's Casey." Neither of us spoke. Neither of us needed to. Mia quietly looked between us. A slow smile spread across her face. "Oh." Olivia glanced at the letters. Then at us. "Wait." Noah blinked twice. "Hold on." Ethan looked completely confused. "What?" Mia smacked his shoulder. "You seriously didn't know?" "Know what?" She pointed toward us. "They've been in love with each other for years." Ethan stared. Then at me. Then Bennett. Then back again. "Are you kidding me?" The entire group burst into laughter. "You knew?" I asked Mia. She folded her arms. "I thought everyone knew." "I didn't." Ethan protested. "You once asked Casey whether he and Bennett were cousins." "I was gathering information." "You are the least observant person I've ever met." Even Bennett started laughing. The tension disappeared instantly. 4 years of confusion dissolved into one ridiculous conversation. That evening our families left. One by one the campus emptied. For the first time in years. It was quiet. Bennett texted me. "Meet me at the lake." 5 minutes later, I was walking the familiar path. The same place where he'd asked me to be his boyfriend. The same benches. The same water. The same evening light. He was already waiting. "You brought it." He held up the instant photo from the cabin. The one Mia had given me. "I figured you might want this." I smiled. "I actually brought something too." I pulled the folded letter from my pocket. He laughed softly. "We're becoming sentimental." "I blame graduation." "I blame you." We sat on the wooden dock. Neither of us spoke for several minutes. The campus reflected across the water. Everything looked peaceful. "So," Bennett finally said, "remember when you said you were reorganizing 4 years of memories?" "I remember. I've been doing the same. And I think I figured something out." "What?" I kept believing our story started at that cabin. He looked at the lake. But it didn't. It started the day I sat beside you in psychology. I smiled. I was thinking exactly the same thing. He laughed. We're becoming predictable. I don't mind. Neither do I. A gentle breeze moved across the water. I got a job offer, he said quietly. I know. It isn't here. I know. It scared me. I turned toward him. But then I realized something. What? He smiled. I don't actually care where I live. I frowned. You don't? No. He looked directly at me. I care who I build my life with. For a second, everything else disappeared. The empty campus, the graduation, the future. All I could see was him. I applied there too, I admitted. His eyes widened. What? I didn't tell you because nothing was certain. I got the offer yesterday. For the first time since I'd met him. Bennett was completely speechless. You mean? I nodded. We're moving to the same city. He laughed. Actually laughed. The kind of laugh that comes only after weeks of carrying fear. I spent the last 2 days trying to figure out how to ask whether you'd even consider it. I already had. He shook his head in disbelief. We really are terrible at saying things early. The worst. He looked down at the old instant photo. You know? What? I used to think this picture was my favorite memory. He placed it beside my letter. Now it isn't. What is? He looked around the quiet lake. This. I followed his gaze. The campus where we'd met. The place we'd grown up together. The evening we finally knew where we were going next. Not because everything was certain, but because we were walking into that uncertainty together. I smiled. So, ready for whatever comes after college. He reached for my hand. I am now. The sun slowly disappeared beyond the trees. Behind us, college became a memory. Ahead of us, for the first time, our story wasn't about wondering if we'd find each other. It was about everything we would build together after we already had. People always talk about the big moments. Graduation, the first job, moving to a new city, the first apartment. Those are the parts everyone remembers. What nobody tells you is that love usually grows in the ordinary days that come afterward. A year later, I woke up before my alarm. Sunlight spilled across our apartment. Not because it was special, because we'd finally found a place that actually got morning light. Bennett had insisted on this apartment. This window, he'd said during the tour. It gets sunrise. I told him that was a ridiculous reason to choose an apartment. It turned out he was right. Every morning, the entire living room filled with warm gold. Every morning, I admitted it silently. I walked into the kitchen. Coffee was already brewing. A sticky note sat beside the machine. Morning. Don't forget today. B. I laughed. As if I could. Our lives weren't dramatic. He worked across town. I worked downtown. Most weekdays looked exactly the same. Breakfast. Traffic. Work. Dinner. Laundry. Groceries. Arguments about whose turn it was to buy milk. Half-finished TV shows we'd never actually finish. If someone had described that life to me in college, I probably would have thought it sounded boring. Instead, it became my favorite part. Because every ordinary day ended with him walking through the front door. That evening we drove back to the cabin. The same one. Mia had somehow convinced everyone to make the reunion happen exactly 1 year later. I booked it 6 months ago, she'd proudly announced. So nobody had an excuse. As we pulled into the driveway, Ethan walked outside holding 2 bags of marshmallows. You actually came. You invited us. I wasn't sure adulthood hadn't made you boring. We're definitely boring. I refused to accept that. Nothing had changed. The porch still creaked. The lake still reflected the sky. The dock still leaned slightly to one side. Even the old rocking chair remained in exactly the same place. It felt impossible, like the cabin had been waiting for us. Dinner lasted for hours. Everyone talked over each other. Olivia had adopted a dog. Noah finally had the online following he'd joked about. Ethan still couldn't cook. Some things truly never changed. Late in the evening, Mia disappeared. She returned carrying something wrapped in a towel. No way, Bennett whispered. She smiled. Oh yes. The instant camera. I found more film. Everyone groaned. Round 2. The pictures started immediately. People laughing. People burning marshmallows. People pretending not to notice the camera. Finally, she looked toward us. You too. I laughed. Seriously? Same spot. What? The dock. Bennett smiled. I know exactly what she's talking about. We walked down to the lake together. The sun had almost disappeared. Orange reflections danced across the water. Mia stood several feet away with the camera. Don't pose. We weren't planning to. Good. She lowered the camera slightly. Just talk. About what? Anything. She stepped back. Forget I'm here. So we did. Bennett looked across the lake. Remember the shooting star? I laughed. You still never told me your wish. I can now. I looked at him. What was it? He smiled. I wished you'd fall in love with me. I stared. Seriously? Seriously. That was before anything happened. I know. You were taking a huge risk. I figured wishes were free. I shook my head, smiling. You know mine? You had one too? I wish this weekend wouldn't end. He looked at me. I guess both of us got lucky. Click. The camera flashed. Neither of us noticed until Mia laughed. Perfect. She walked over several minutes later. The photo slowly appeared. Nobody spoke. The first picture from a year ago showed two friends looking at each other without understanding why. This one showed two people who finally did. Mia held both photos side by side. That's my favorite story. She handed them to me. Keep them together. I slipped both pictures into my wallet. Later that night, Bennett and I walked to the end of the dock. Exactly where we'd sat after everyone else had gone inside. The stars looked just as bright. So, I said, so, you know what I've been thinking? What? 4 years of college. Yeah. One weekend changed everything. He smiled. I don't think that's true. No. I think one weekend finally gave us enough quiet to hear what we'd been feeling for years. I thought about it. About the psychology classroom. The study sessions. The coffee before presentations. The endless conversations. The hike. The kayak. The waterfall. The letters. The graduation. He was right. The cabin hadn't created our story. It had simply revealed it. I love you, I said. The words came naturally. No hesitation. No fear. Just certainty. He smiled in the same quiet way he always did whenever something mattered. I love you too. There was no audience. No music. No dramatic moment. Just the sound of water touching the dock. The same sound that had been there the first night we stayed awake talking. Funny how life works. Sometimes you spend years looking for the moment that changes everything. And later you realize. It wasn't one moment at all. It was 1,000 ordinary moments quietly leading you to the person who had been beside you from the very beginning. As we walked back toward the lights of the cabin, I looked over my shoulder one last time. The lake was calm. The porch light glowed warmly. Friends laughed inside. A year earlier, I'd arrived there wondering whether I was about to lose the people who mattered most. Instead, I found the person I would spend the rest of my life choosing, one ordinary day after another.